Chapter 4 of the Training of Wild Animals. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Fern Bartley. The Training of Wild Animals by Frank Charles Bostock. Chapter 4. The Feeding of Snakes and Elephants. All wild beasts in their natural state will hunt and kill their food when hungry, and if too lazy to do this, which is frequently the case with the lion, they will keep a lookout for the remains of some other animal's kill. When wild, animals always provide themselves with sufficient food, and appear to have many ways of working off a too heavy meal. In captivity it is very different. They appear to lose their judgment to a certain extent, and in many cases will overfeed, if given the opportunity, or in some instances deliberately starve themselves for no accountable reason. This is especially the case with many snakes, generally the larger ones, and unless most carefully watched, they will literally starve themselves to death. Snakes are difficult to feed. They appear to dislike being seen eating, and as they will not eat mammals or birds after rigor mortis has set in, great care is needed in feeding them. Pythons will sometimes go as long as 8 or 9 months without feeding, and when this is the case it is necessary to feed them by force. Very few snakes, especially pythons, will allow themselves to be handled. At certain times, it is true, they will appear either indifferent, or, if such a cool condition can be called friendliness, friendly toward their keepers. But this is, in nearly all cases, simply a sign that they are torpid from cold, and it merely needs the house to be heated a little to show not only that they can be very lively, but very spiteful and vindictive. Occasionally, when some little operation is necessary, the snake has to be overpowered, but it is possible to do this only by numbers. No one man could do it. He would be crushed before he had time to turn around. The best way to set to work when the snake has deliberately refused to feed for many months is to wait until it is asleep. Then, at a given signal, several men pounce upon it. One grasps it by the back of its neck, several others stand on or hold different parts of its body, and others stand ready with rabbits, rats, and other small animals on the end of long poles with which they force the food down the reptile's throat. It is needless to say that some terrific tussles take place on these occasions, and often there is great danger. Unless the snake is quickly subdued, it is likely to subdue those who are molesting it, and even when several strong, able-bodied men are grasping it firmly, it will sometimes recoil with so much force and suddenness that the whole lot may be thrown to the ground. The most dangerous part is when the moment comes for prying open its jaws. If this has been done safely, there comes the second difficulty of forcing food down its throat. There is no doubt that this process is objectionable, and in all probability a little painful to the snake, and it is not to be wondered that at this moment it generally resists with all its power. Even should the rabbit be got down the throat of the reptile, there is always the chance that it may be drawn out again with the pole. But this operation is generally performed successfully, and when the python has inside about a dozen rabbits, 1 or 2 guinea pigs, and a few pigeons, he becomes heavy and sleepy, and at last settles down in a state of repletion from which he will probably not awaken for several days. There have been many dangerous accidents from feeding snakes by force when they refuse food. Once a trainer entered and grasped a big python at the back of the neck, while several other men made ready to catch hold of it in other places. He caught it nicely in the right place, and was just speaking to the others when, to his horror, he found that the python had coiled itself firmly round his legs and body, and that he was unable to move. With a great effort he shouted, and the men, realizing instantly what had happened, rushed forward, and with united efforts uncoiled the monster, and so set him free. It was a matter of life and death, for in another moment the breath would have been crushed out of him, and he would have become a shapeless mass of flesh. It was only by his nerve and prompt call that he saved himself, for the men said afterward that until he shouted they were not aware of what the snake had done. After this, nothing would ever induce that trainer to have anything to do with snakes again. He said he could never forget the feeling of unspeakable horror and indefinable helplessness he experienced when the coils were encircling him. At another time, a young pig was thrown to a pair of snakes. In this case the snakes were ravenously hungry, and consequently very lively. The larger one of the two darted for it, but the smaller snake was too quick for him, and had swallowed the pig whole before the other could touch it. Now followed a very curious incident, and one which I believe has not often been observed. The large snake waited until another pig was thrown in, and took care this time to get it, but immediately after swallowing it, deliberately turned to the small snake and swallowed him, swollen as he was with the first pig. This snake lay in a state of repletion after this for weeks, and from various indications that we had, I don't fancy that his cannibalism agreed with him. But a more curious incident than either of these occurred at the Pan-American exhibition with Great Peter, the largest python ever kept in captivity. Great Peter had been fasting for some time, most of the summer in fact, and we were beginning to feel anxious about him, when, toward the end of September, he suddenly became very lively, always a sure sign of hunger. Much delighted at these signs, his keeper at once looked for suitable food for him, and procured a young razor-back pig. As a general rule, all animals when put in with snakes are rendered helpless by fear. They appear to be paralyzed by a strange fascination, and instead of making the slightest resistance or attempt to get away, stay on the very spot where they are thrown until the snake kills them with a bite, or thrusts them into their living tomb by swallowing them. But this little razor-back was made of different stuff, and was neither fascinated nor helpless from fear. The moment he entered the cage, it was evident that he meant to have a good fight for it, no matter what happened. He gave the python no time to spring, but, taking time by the forelock, ran up to the huge snake, screaming shrilly at the top of his voice, and fastened his sturdy tusks firmly in the back of the snake's neck. He squealed no more after this, but attended strictly to business, and hung on like grim death. There was a momentary pause, and then the daring little pig shook his enemy vigorously as he would a rat. For a second or two over 32 feet of python coiled and lashed about the cage in a furious manner, but the pig hung on. His triumph was not long. The contest was too unequal. Suddenly the thick coils left the air, and descending on the plucky little animal, coiled round and round, crushing his body and cracking his ribs as though they were nutshells. But still the pig hung on until the coils of the snake gradually relaxed. And then, as they loosened weakly and fell off, the pig, game to the last, dropped off the python's neck, dead. His enemy lay quietly beside him, the conqueror and the conquered together. Had the razorback only allowed himself to give one little squeal when he was being crushed, he would have been obliged to let go his hold, and we might have saved the python, but his pluckiness cost us a valuable reptile. Elephants are big feeders, and few realize the quantity of food they need. A fair-sized elephant in a healthy condition will consume on average about 200 pounds of hay, a bushel of oats, and 6 or 8 loaves of bread a day. This is in addition to all the other things in the way of peanuts, cakes, crackers, nuts, etc. it gets from the visitors. Occasionally, 1 or 2 large basketfuls of fresh vegetables are given to each one, for elephants are fond of any vegetables, fruits, or grain, and nearly always seem to be hungry. From this a rough estimate can be gathered of the vast quantity of food it is necessary to provide for a group of only half a dozen elephants. The difficulties are often considerable, especially in small country places where the produce is not equal to the demand. It will often take 1 or 2 men all their time to procure enough food to keep the animals even in fair condition. Grain can generally be had, but too much grain is not good for them, and the necessity for a variety, which is not always obtainable, causes much difficulty. Elephants are not particularly strong or robust constitutionally. They suffer from various ailments in captivity, even with the greatest care. Colds and chills are the most frequent, and though not themselves dangerous, they sometimes lead to pneumonia, and when once an elephant has pneumonia, he never recovers. It is almost impossible to give an elephant medicine. Every way has been tried, but in many cases to no purpose. The moment he tastes it, nothing will induce him to swallow it, and he promptly spits it out. Capsules have been tried, in the hope that the animal would swallow them whole, but he at once crushed them with his teeth, and at the first taste the usual spitting out took place. Medicine has also been introduced into loaves of bread and drinks of water or milk, but the elephant detected it at once, and it was of course absolutely impossible to force it down his throat, as can be done with some of the other animals. About the only possible thing to make an elephant take when he has a bad cold is a good dose of hot whiskey and onions, and appears not only to like it but to wish for more. However, if elephants are looked after and cared for properly, it is rarely necessary to give them medicine. They are generally healthy, and the chief thing to guard against is a chill or cold, when there is always the possibility of pneumonia following. An elephant sleeps in a peculiar manner. Nearly all lie on their left sides with their trunks curled up, making a peculiar hissing noise at regular intervals, something like the sound of steam issuing from a kettle. He is not a sound sleeper. He does not take much notice of his keeper prowling round in the night, but should anything strange or unusual take place, the hissing stops suddenly. 2 small red lights appear in the elephant's head, and the animal is wide awake and evidently watching. At the first sign of danger he trumpets shrilly, so that oftentimes he gives the first alarm, when no living thing beside suspects anything amiss. End of Chapter 4. The Training of Snakes and Elephants. Read by Fern Bartley, Dublin, Ireland. 7th of May, 2021.